such thing as an objective difference between right and wrong and feel these are just constructs that exist by human beings, and we get to make up what's right and what's wrong. 2/3 of people. That's where we're at. That's where we're really at. Natural law versus man's law or government. Here's the differences. Natural law is based upon the principles. It's based upon principles and truth, meaning things that are inherent to creation and are not made by humankind. Natural law can only either be harmonized with due to knowledge and understanding or rejected due to ignorance. So it's not something that is based on compliance because of we fear the punishment that would result of not understanding it. Okay, if you don't understand it and live according to it, the result is inescapable. Because men and women are not actually creating the result. Okay? The universe is bringing that result to us, intelligently and dynamically. All right? In other words, once again, this is about consequences. You behave a certain way, there's certain consequences. You change the behavior, you'll change the consequential results. Natural law is universal, which means that it exists and applies anywhere in the universe regardless of physical location. There is no place you can go in the physical universe to escape natural law. Let me know if you find a way out of this universe and into another where natural law no longer applies, and we'll take a look at it together. But until you figure out the way out of this universe and into a place that's not governed by law, you're bound by natural law. Okay? Natural law is eternal. It will exist for as long as the universe exists, and it is immutable. Exists and applies for as long as the universe exists and cannot be changed by anything humanity is capable of doing or any other species in the universe is capable of doing for that matter. Man's law, on the other hand, let's look at how this contrasts with natural law. It's not based on principles and truth, it's based on dogmatic beliefs that are programs that are running in the human mind. These are constructs of the mind that operate like programs. Man's law is complied with due to the fear of the punishment that will be conducted upon people who attempt to not comply with it. It's most of the only reason people ever comply with the law of man. And that's a very low state of consciousness, fear. That really is only going to get you all the negative things that we say we don't want if we're in that vibration. Man's law differs with location based upon the whim of legislators, like prohibition. Well, I'm allowed to smoke marijuana in one state, and then I could be jailed for it in another. My freedom can be taken if I cross this imaginary line. Okay, I'm a gun owner, okay? If I take certain weapons that I own across an imaginary line, I could be jailed for years. But over this side of the imaginary line, it's okay. And you're just exercising a right. Over here, it's morally wrong. We'll cage you for it. Over here, yeah, you're allowed to do that. You can have that high-capacity magazine. But over here, you're going into a cage for it, just by crossing an imaginary barrier called a state border. And people think that makes sense. They think the moral relativism of man's law makes sense. They actually believe something can be moral in one place and immoral in another place. You know? That's cognitive dissonance. That's holding two contradictory notions in the mind simultaneously and accepting them both when they're clear contradictions with each other. It's called lying to yourself. Let's be honest about what it really is. It's called lying to yourself. Man's law changes with time based upon the whim of legislators, which is also moral relativism. Prohibition in the 1920s. Oh, it was legal to possess and consume alcohol. Then for years it became illegal to do so. Then it switched back to becoming magically moral again. We won't cage you for doing it. Well, it changes over time based on our preferences and likes and dislikes. Yeah, we get to make up what law is, what right and wrong are. It's called moral relativism. All right? And it's one of the tenets of Satanism. So what does this mean for the law of man, actually? You know, that people seem to have so much respect for. You know, oh, we're a nation of laws written by men. You know, we don't give a damn about moral law. We don't really give a damn about what's right and wrong. You know, but we have so much respect for the law of man, which we people actually believe is somehow based in morality, when it's nothing of the kind could be further from couldn't get any further from the truth than that. It's based in moral relativism, which is about the whims of the legislator at any given time or place. You listen to certain forms of music in certain countries in the Middle East, you could be jailed for years just by putting a certain song on. Imagine this. Now, and we would think that's unacceptable and deplorable. Yeah, we think you have this 30-round magazine here. This state only allows 10 cartridges to go into a magazine. I bring the physical object, even if it's not loaded with any ammunition, into another state. I can be put in a cage. Physical piece of plastic. It's just total nonsense. Either something is a right and you're allowed to own it and you need to be responsible for it, or it's not a right because you're harming somebody. It doesn't get any simpler than that. So what's this all mean for man's law? In light of natural law, what does it mean? To understand natural law, what does that mean for the laws of man here on earth? Well, what it actually means, it's simple if-then logic to apply. If a particular man-made law is in harmony with natural law, then it follows logically that it is redundant. It is stating the obvious. It is stating what is already known. It's like saying, I'm going to write down, yes, during the day the sky refracts a blue frequency. The sky is blue. I'm going to write that down and make it so. Well, it's redundant. It's self-evident. You can go out into the sky and look at the natural color of the sky on a clear day and see what the frequency is with your own eyes. No, you don't need to have it written down. Okay? It's a redundancy. So if it's in harmony already with natural law, it's stating a truth that is already there. It's an inherent truth. It's pre-existing. It's self-evident. Therefore, the writing down of that concept and calling it a law is irrelevant and unnecessary. Now let's look at the opposite. What if something that man writes down as a law is in direct opposition to natural law? So if a particular man-made law is in opposition to natural law, it follows logically that it is both false, meaning that it is incorrect. Okay, that's what natural law is. It's based in truth, that which is. And it's also immoral. Because if it's not based in natural law, it means that it is doing something that is actually harming somebody by taking something from them that doesn't belong to you. Like taxation, like permits and licensing, like suspending rights that do already exist, etc., so forth. All right? So, therefore, it's wrong, and it cannot be legitimately binding upon anyone. You can't write down a wrong and say, this is morally binding upon you, even though it creates harm, it causes harm, yet you must follow it. And people believe this. We asked in the natural law seminar, how many people believe that if a law is passed and it restricts a right that you feel you have naturally because that action that it's saying you may not do causes no one else any harm? Do you have any moral obligation to obey that law until you could find a way to get it changed? And over 2/3 of people said, yes, you have a moral obligation to obey that law. Because these people have the moral right to issue commands and write down laws that constrain you, even if that behavior actually doesn't harm anybody and therefore is a natural right. You would still have to try to find a way to get that law changed. Nonsense. Nonsense. No one can be legitimately bound to a dictate of man that prevents somebody from exercising a natural right. It's called mind control, is what it's called. So in light of the differences between man's law and natural law, in light of natural law, man's law is both irrelevant and unnecessary, as it is either redundant because it is in harmony with natural law, or it is completely immoral because it is in direct opposition to natural law. This is a system of slavery that is not needed. There is equality under natural law, perfect equality. Everyone has the exact same rights. No one has any more or less rights than anyone else. Also, since rights are not created by humanity, and since they are the birthright of humanity, gifted to us by the creator of the universe, no human being or group of human beings is actually capable, in reality, of granting rights to anyone else, nor is any human being capable of revoking rights from anyone else. Everybody has the same rights. No one can make up a new right. No one can grant a right to somebody that is actually a wrong. Does not exist, never has existed, never will exist. This is an illusory belief system. All right? I'm not telling you people don't believe that can be done. I'm telling you in reality, in truth, it can never be done. Chris Leispooner phrased it pretty well. He said, government is nothing but men acting in concert. The morality and value of government, like any other association of men, will be no greater and no less than the morality and value of the men comprising it. Since government is nothing but men, its inherent, quote, authority to act is in no way greater or different than the, quote, authority to act of any individuals in isolation, like that example of two people on the planet. Government has no magic powers or, quote, authority that is not possessed by private individuals. Let he who asserts that government may do that which the individual may not do assume the onus of proof. That means the burden of proof, and demonstrate his contention. And you know what? There's nobody on this planet that can do that. Because when it comes down to it, if you're telling somebody else they may either commit a wrong against somebody else or prevent someone else from exercising a right, that's a lie. And that does not exist. Not in reality. It exists in a diseased mind is where it exists. Only in a sick mind is where that belief exists. You have to be imbalanced in the mind, in the psyche, to believe that that's true. It's a mental illness. I mean, that's what it really is. The word government, you break it down. People say this word every day almost, and yet they've never looked at the etymological roots of the word. It comes from the Latin verb gubernare. Once again, no V in classical Latin. No V, okay? So again, V's were rendered as either B's or P's in classical Latin language. So you could write this in what would be more modern Latin as gubernare with a V. But in classical Latin or ancient Latin, there is no V, so it would have been rendered with a B, gubernare. Now, what's the election of a governor called? It's called a gubernatorial election. Gubernatorial. Gubernare is in there. Okay? Gubernare means to control. The verb gubernare in Latin means to control. The Latin noun mens, which is where the second part of the word ment is derived from, means mind. Okay? So you put these together, and the word government actually literally, from its etymological roots, means to control the mind, or in other words, mind control. Now, I'm going to put something else up here for a moment. The etymological origin of the English suffix ment, M-E-N-T, is often debated in this etymological breakdown. All right? And I've gotten stuff about this constantly, and I've told people I'm not interested in hearing about it anymore. I know where this comes from. I know why the creators of the English language made it so. Made it like this. Okay? It is overwhelmingly clear by people who have studied linguistics and the origins of words, okay, in English from ancient languages, that the creators of the English language deliberately chose the Latin noun mens, meaning mind, to represent or mean in English the state of or the condition of. And this was done in direct keeping with the first principle of natural law, as we've already discussed, the principle of mentalism, which demonstrates that in order for any particular thing, event, or circumstance, any state or condition to exist in manifested reality, as it currently does, which is known as the plane of effects, it must have first existed in the plane of causality or the mental realm, the mind. Okay? We've already looked at that principle of natural law. So, anything that ends in ment, the original etymological derivation means that it was made that way first by a state of mind which led to its creation in physical reality. Okay? Any word you can think of that ends in ment, meaning the state of or the condition of, means it happened in mind first, and therefore it led to the state of or the condition of in physical reality. Okay? So, when I say that government means mind control, it literally does, and that is an accurate etymological breakdown. Okay? The word mens was deliberately chosen for specific reasons. And I just explained the reason of that meaning, the state of or the condition of. And many people want to hotly contest that. I'm telling you outright, they're wrong. They don't understand why that was chosen. Mens, meaning mind, was chosen deliberately to mean the state of or the condition of. Government is based on this illusory and false concept called authority. People think certain people are authorities, that they actually have rights that other people don't have. The right to command, compel, coerce, and tell people, this is right, this is what you're going to do, and if you disagree, I have the power to actually compel, coerce, or constrain you against your will. If you're not harming anybody, even in the taking of that action. Authority is based upon an equal illusion that is called jurisdiction. Now, if we break down this word, it comes from the Latin noun. Jurisdiction comes from Latin, jus juris. Jus juris in Latin means law. Juris is the possessive case. And the Latin verb dictere. So, jus dictere, juris dictere, jurisdiction. Okay? Dictere means to say or to speak. Thus, jurisdiction literally means to say what the law is. Or in other words, we get to make up what the law is. The law is not something that exists in nature and is based upon right and wrong and truth and morality. No, we get to make it up. We're God. We get to say what's right and what's wrong. And therefore, since we make the law, we're the owners of these people. They're in our jurisdiction. You know, we own them. And we get to make up what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. Authority ultimately is an illusion, again, of a diseased mind, a diseased psyche, based entirely in violence and built upon the erroneous and dogmatic belief that some people are masters who have the moral right to issue commands and others are slaves who have a moral obligation to obey the commands of the masters. I don't care what you want to call it. You can euphemize it any way you want. I call it what it really is. Slavery. That's what it really is. Doesn't come down to anything else. You can call it whatever you want, euphemize it, try to make it sound as nice or as pleasant as possible. It's all one thing. It's called slavery. It's always immoral and it needs to be ended. That's it. And we have to develop the knowledge and the courage to end it. The knowledge, the care, and the courage to end it. The belief in the legitimacy of, quote, authority, this illusory nonsense notion, is the belief in the legitimacy of slavery. Anybody who believes in that authority is legitimate and government is legitimate, whether they want to admit it or not, or know it or not, or understand it or not, I don't care what they believe. They are advocating the legitimacy of slavery. That's not my belief. I don't care who calls that my belief. I'm just looking right into the camera and saying this. Because I know the people in this room know that that's not my belief. I'm telling anybody who's listening to this, that's not my belief. That's eternal truth. Eternal truth. Okay? You believe in these concepts, you are a supporter of slavery. The end. That's how it really is. Not because I said so. Because that's how it really is. Okay? And that's called mind control. For somebody to believe that slavery is legitimate, you gotta be under deep mind control. You gotta be either that or a sick, psychopathic, absolute piece of garbage. Okay? One of those things or another is true if you believe in those concepts. And again, I'm not afraid to tell it to somebody right to their face like that. I don't care. I'm not here to serve truth, make friends, or be liked. I'm here to tell people what the truth. I'm sorry, I'm not here to serve human beings, make friends, or be liked. I am here to serve the truth. Whether it will be accepted is not up to me. I'm doing what I'm charged to do by creation. Okay? Whether it's accepted is somebody else's karma, not mine. Ultimately, authority is the idea that man can become God and through, quote, jurisdiction, dictate the law. What the dark occultists of this world, who are behind ostensible governments in the world, they set up all of these institutions as temples, right? What this sick psychopathic priest class ultimately believes is they're going to become God. We're going to turn natural law on top of its head, and we're going to rule in hell. That's it. We're going to rule in hell. It's a religion. This is a religion. Okay, government's a religion. The concept of authority is a religion. Most people don't see it that way. And I mean religion in the term of false religion. Okay? It comes from the Latin religare. I laugh when I hear people say it comes from relegare or relegare, R-E-L-E-G-A-R-E, or relegare, okay? Which means to read over again, to go back over something that you've already read and read it again. It's the most ridiculous, nonsensical derivation I've ever heard for the word religion, to reread. I mean, please, let's put this to bed, folks. Religion does not mean to reread. It doesn't come from relegare or relegare. I can't remember which infinitive is used for that verb offhand, but it comes from religare, hence religion, R-E-L-I-G-A-R-E. All right? Relegare means to tie back, to hold back, or to thwart from forward progress by tying or binding. Tying up so that you can't move forward. That's what relegare is, and that is the etymological root of religion. Because a false religion is a system of control that is based in unchallenged dogmatic belief, which keeps the mind in a prison in order to hold back the progress of consciousness. And that's where the bulk of humanity is at, in a brain cage. They're in the mind cage. Okay? There is a positive connotation of religion. It also means to reunite with. And what we need to reunite ourselves with is the truth and common sense and natural law and a knowledge that there's no such thing as legitimacy to slavery. That's what we need to reunite with. And then we'd be living with true religion. We'd be practicing true religion instead of fake religion. We got to stop trying to make our religion truth. And we got to start making truth our religion. That's what needs to be done. So what's the one true divide that exists in humanity? People say, this is separation talk. We're all one. No, we're not. There is one true divide that does exist in reality. And here's what it is. The one true divide that separates humanity into two distinct types of individuals. The criteria for this divide is whether or not an individual believes in, quote, authority, and therefore believes that there is legitimacy to slavery. The two groups of people are the people who know slavery is never legitimate and people who believe that it can be legitimate. That's what actually separates humanity. See, all the other things, divide and conquer. Race, religion, sexuality, income, religious belief systems. These are all divide and conquer techniques. There's one real difference, whether somebody believes in slavery or not. And of course, people have called this difference statists and anarchists, right? So here's a couple of memes that I picked up on Facebook. Statism is the brilliant idea that we give a small group of people the right to kidnap, imprison, harass, steal from, and kill people so that we can be protected from people who kidnap, harass, steal from, and kill people. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense if you ask me. I think it's going to work out brilliantly with that system in place. Okay? An anarchist, I couldn't find any good pictures of anarchists because they're all fake anarchists who want to destroy property and think that they're somehow doing the world some good. You know, the black bloc. They're really communists in disguise. Okay? When you really boil down to it, they don't know what anarchy is at all. They're just some, Marxists who thinks that that ideology, that junk ideology is some kind of a pathway to freedom. It's a bunch of left-brain clowns who have no understanding of natural law. Go put your polka dot jumpsuit and some floppy shoes on and go get yourself a nice clown nose. Seriously, because that's what those people are. They're a joke. They're a joke. They don't know the first thing about what freedom is. Not the first thing. Okay? So, I was looking for good pictures of anarchists. So I was going to put, maybe myself, Larkin Rose, Freeman, Frater X, people who get all this stuff, who I personally like their work. Michael Tessarion, etc. David Icke. But I said, hey, let's put a meme up there that really expresses it. So I found this picture of Jesus, a meme that says, I'm an anarchist, but most of my followers are statists. People who are these fake-ass Christians who believe they somehow are following the teachings of Christ. And they believe in government. They believe in financial institutions. They believe in organized religion. These are the three things that killed Christ, if you even accept the historicity of the event. Who was Christ waging basic conflict with? The Pharisees and Sadducees, the organized religious order and controlling religious orders of his day. Okay? What really got him into deep trouble, he was pissing them off, but they were already on the wane. The old world order was on the way out, and the new world order was already on the way in at that time. He got himself in real trouble when he went against the financial institutions, the money changers at the temple, taking people for a ride for temple coins. Right? And he flogged their ass. He took out the switch on them. Right? Not somebody who never got angry, who accepted evil and said, oh, it's just an experience. None of it matters. Took out the switch and beat their ass for usury. Okay? And then who finally put him to death? The police of their day. The Roman Empire. Roman centurions, the operating standing army and police of their day, the government. So who is he waging spiritual warfare against to try to bring righteousness into the world? And again, I don't care whether you accept it as historical fact or spiritual allegory. I could care less. Believe what you want. Doesn't matter. All that matters is the teaching. He was waging spiritual war against the three entrenched, mind control, religious establishments of his day. Organized religion, organized finance, and government. And people don't see it that way, so-called Christians. Because they're not interested in the real teachings. They just want to call themselves something and identify it and say, oh, that magically makes me this. Because you go to church on Sunday doesn't make you a Christian. No more than going to a synagogue would make you align with the true teachings of the Torah. No more than, attending a mosque would align you with the true teachings of Islam or any other religion, to take the core essence of the teachings of morality from those systems. They're all people who claim these faiths in name only when they don't understand real freedom. So a statist is an individual who erroneously believes there's such a thing as authority that is vested in certain human beings, magically giving them the right to rule over other people. This authority means that certain people who we call government have the, quote, moral right to issue commands to those whom they rule, those under their jurisdiction, and that their subjects or slaves have a, quote, moral obligation to obey the arbitrary dictates or laws, quote unquote, that are set by their masters. Most simply put, a statist is nothing more than someone who believes in the legitimacy of slavery. Conversely, an anarchist, a true anarchist anyway, is one who knows that there could never be legitimacy to authority or government, because those terms are simply euphemisms for violence and slavery and coercion, which are always immoral and in opposition to natural law. Let's look at what the word anarchy really means. Again, you got to break it down. From the Greek prefix an, which means without or the absence of. And the Greek noun archon, they're written in Greek script, which means master or ruler. And again, I mean externally. One who externally rules another or claims to be the master of another. That's what the term archon means in its connotation. Anarchy, as we can see by putting these together, does not mean without rules. The word archon does not mean rules. Okay? Because there's always going to be rules in effect called natural law, the laws of morality. It means rulers, imposed rulers. That's what archon means in Greek. It literally means anarchy now, putting it together. An, absence of, archon, master or ruler. The absence of masters or rulers. Externally imposed masters or rulers. Meaning, when we put it together, okay, it means without rulers, without masters. Now, if you give people that term, no masters, no rulers, no masters, no slaves, what word are they going to associate those phrases with? Freedom. But if you tell people, what does anarchy mean to you? What do you associate it with? What are they going to tell you? Chaos, which is the exact opposite. That's in that other column. Okay? They have deliberately obfuscated the meaning of the word through a mind control technique called endless repetition. If I could keep telling you a word doesn't mean what it means, that's not a projector, that's a hammer. Hey, could you check out my hammer over there and make sure it's projecting the image on the board correctly? You know, the bulb burned out in my hammer. I might need to go buy a new hammer. If I kept doing that endlessly for years and years and years, people would start calling that device a hammer. If I got enough people to keep calling it that. So they've gotten enough people to call freedom chaos. Think about that. They've gotten enough people to believe that the absence of the state of slavery means chaos instead of freedom. It's almost unfathomable. It's almost incomprehensible. The mind job that's been done on this species. It's almost incomprehensible. Anarchy is the state of existence where there are no masters and no slaves. Therefore, what it really means is the absence of slavery, or in other words, true freedom. That's all it means. I prefer to call it anarchony, okay? Keeping the entire word archon instead of taking out the O-N, okay? If we keep that there and call it anarchony, and I say I'm an anarchonist, people will ask, well, what the hell is that? And then you could really break the word down and say the absence of archons, the absence of those who would claim to be masters over a population of slaves. That's what an anarchonist is. It's saying that's illegitimate, that's unnecessary, and that we need to do away with that state of existence. Okay? So we look at this true divide again, the statist and the anarchist. I call the statist the archonist. This is somebody who believes in the legitimacy of the archons, the rulers. Okay? And I'll be talking about in future presentation the concept of the archons more in future presentations. And the anarchist, as it's been called, I think should be called the anarchonist. Because that's somebody who knows that there's no legitimacy to the mastery over other people, or the rulership externally over others, keeping them as slaves or subjects. There's no legitimacy to that. And that's the one true divide that separates all consciousness here on the earth. The real divide and the real enlightenment comes. Do you understand there's no legitimacy to slavery, or do you continue to believe that there's legitimacy to slavery? That's the divide in consciousness that has to be bridged. The fear of chaos This is what keeps this system going. Chaos can't be viewed as something to fear. It's got to be viewed as a teacher, a harsh teacher, but a teacher nonetheless. See, chaos teaches us through the apophatic process what not to do. Okay? That's a bad idea. Okay? You probably shouldn't do that. If your desire is not to burn your hand to the point where it's blistering and flesh is starting to peel off of it. If you don't care about whether that happens, by all means keep it right on that stove. Okay? Right on that electric stove. But see, if you say, I don't want to be burned, there are requirements for obtaining that condition. It means you can't keep your hand on something that is extraordinarily hot, or natural law will take over and burn your flesh. Doesn't require your belief. That's how it works. Well, this is humanity. Humanity is the little child that is a little slow, and they want not to be burned, yet simultaneously they insist, no, I want to put my hand on the burner while the range is on and not be burned simultaneously. Well, good luck with that, folks, because it doesn't work that way. You don't want to be burned, the hand can't be kept there while the stove is on. The end. You don't want negative, self-inflicted suffering and chaos in your life, you got to align your behavior to natural law, which means you got to know the difference objectively between right and wrong, and willfully, through your free will, deliberately choose the right action over the wrong action. Then you won't be burned. But as long as you have your hand on that stove, which means you're in opposition to natural law, enjoy the burn. Enjoy it. Right? Get used to it till the flesh melts off the bone and then the bones turn into dust. Because that's what you're going to get. That's how it works. And again, nobody wants to hear that. They don't want to hear that the natural laws don't care about you. They work flawlessly all the time and bring you the result that you're creating. The control and slavery system is actually about the limitation of free will through the destruction of possibility. See, all they've done, right? The old world order used to be religion and priest kings, right? We're in between you and God. We're the intercessors, the intermediaries. We make the law, you're our subjects, you're our slaves, you obey, or it's our wrath. All they've done is take the concept of a singular ruler, which was the old world order, and they've converted it into the concept of now there's a ruling class called government that gets to make up what we tell you you may or may not do. Okay? And they're up here at the top of the pyramid now. That's all. They turned it from a monarchy to somewhat of an oligarchy. But it's the same concept. We're the moral masters that you have a moral obligation to obey, and you're the slave class, that has an obligation to obey our commands. That's it. Nothing changed. All they did is say, well, no, people don't no longer believe in the priest king, so we need to create an institution where this quote-unquote authority is seemingly diffused through many people. It's always been nonsense. It's always been mind control. It's not going to be anything else other than that until it goes away. True freedom includes infinite possibility because infinite possibility, by definition, includes the possibility for chaos. For real freedom to exist, we have to accept, hey, things might not go right all the time. We live in a physical domain, a physical world. Hey, there could be dangers, Nothing could ever be sanitized or made completely safe as far as physical world activities are concerned. There's always going to be the possibility something could happen, go wrong, somebody could get hurt, chaos could happen. Okay? If you live in that state of fear that that's going to happen, what is that? Is that high consciousness or low consciousness? It's low consciousness. Low consciousness can only create what? Chaos. The fear of chaos itself can only get you more chaos because it's based in fear. As we see, just keep referring to that expression chart. You know? Go online. I have slides of it online. It's in videos I've done. Print it. Read it. Look at it. Print it and stick it up in your home. Understand how that chart works. You know, those expressions that I went over, those 10 expressions. The possibility, okay, of chaos from manifesting, the possibility that it may manifest has to be embraced without fear if we're going to be truly free. It must be embraced. You have to say, I am going to allow for the possibility that chaos may occur. Because that's getting out of the consciousness of fear. Which that's what will lead to freedom. Removing that fear. The fear of the possibility of chaos is actually equated to the fear of true freedom. When somebody says, I can't ever believe that a system with no masters could work out. I can't even envision how it could work out. What's that called? What's been deadened in that person? What have they lost? Imagination. There it is. That is actually the equivalent of the death of the imagination. Now, what is the imagination? The imagination is the powerful ability of the human mind to envision a different state or condition than the one which is already manifested in the present. So, imagination must first be present in the mind in order to create a different state of existence than the one currently being experienced. And this is because, according to the principle of mentalism, for any different state to manifest in the physical world, the plane of effects, it must first exist within the mind or the plane of causality. If the imagination is stifled or destroyed, and the destruction of the imagination is what I refer to as total mind control. You can't go into any more total mind controlled state as the imagination being dead. All right? If that happens, any positive change to our state of existence becomes completely impossible. And this is where many people are already at. The fear of the possibility of chaos is more than even the fear of true freedom. It is the death of the imagination. It is putting the mind permanently in the cage. Okay? So you can't let that force within us called the imagination die. Because that's the only way to envision a way out of the prison. You have to envision it first, then you have to put those thoughts and emotions that you used for that envisioning process into actual action so that it becomes manifested in the physical world. Through their fear of the possibility of chaos, which is actually the fear of true freedom, most people advocate the legitimacy and continuance of authority in government and are therefore actually advocating the legitimacy and continuance of violence and slavery. Those who believe that authority is necessary and that it must continue because of this fear of chaos have actually been duped into believing that human slavery is necessary. And get this, folks, human slavery must therefore continue in order to prevent chaos. Now imagine that. Imagine that. That's what statism is, though. That's what the religion called the belief in government or statism is. It is the belief that human slavery is necessary and must continue indefinitely in order to prevent chaos from manifesting. Now, tell me how that could possibly work. Can violence and slavery, which is actually what government is a euphemism for, statism and government are just euphemisms for violence and slavery. Okay? Can violence and slavery ever possibly prevent chaos? Why? What? Why can't it? Because they are chaos. Violence and slavery are chaos. We are already in the state of chaos. Being held under the threat of violence and duress, which is slavery, is the state of chaos. So forget about fearing chaos coming on. You're in it now. Surprise, surprise. Hate to break the news to you all. Okay? We're already in the state of chaos. We need to create real order by getting rid of violence and slavery. order followers. These are the people who keep this system of slavery in place. Okay? They're the people who keep this system of slavery in place. Let me just say this again. Order followers are the people who keep the existence of slavery in place. Not the ruling class, not the masters, not the so-called elite, which aren't the elite of anything but the bottom of a trash can. Okay? The people who keep slavery in place are the people who willfully follow their orders. Nobody wants to hear that. And people will hate you for saying it. Following orders means, by definition, doing what you are told to do without judging for yourself whether or not that action that you are being ordered to carry out is actually right or wrong. That's the definition of following orders. I mean, can anybody refute that? Is that not the actual definition of following someone else's order? By definition, if you're following the order, you're given the order and then you just act. You just do it because you're following the order. You don't sit there and go, is what that person told me to do right? Do I have a right to do that? Is that moral? Should I do that because, it's okay and it doesn't hurt somebody else? Or should I not do that because it actually does cause harm? It's not what an order follower does in their mind. An order follower says, yes, sir, and follows the order. That's why it's called an order follower. That's why it's called following an order. So that's the definition of what an order follower is. It's not my perception of what an order follower is. It's the actual definition of order following. Okay? If an individual, this is key to understand, if an individual is performing the task of following orders, by definition, that individual cannot be exercising conscience. Since, by definition, exercising conscience means that one is willfully choosing through their free will for themselves right action over wrong action. So the concept of following orders is completely polar opposite to the concept of exercising conscience. You cannot be doing the same things simultaneously. It's impossible to do those two things simultaneously. They are contradictions in terms by definition. Okay? Most people don't grasp that. Okay? By definition, if you're following orders, you cannot be actually exercising conscience, which involves free will choice based on the knowledge of right and wrong. Here's what order following gets us as far as a nation is concerned. Not that we're not already there, not that these people already didn't take us, because we're taken by them already, covertly. They took us through the school systems. They couldn't beat us militarily. So they said, well, let's send our ideologues over there and get into the minds of their children. And if you don't believe that's what happened, you're very, very, very naive. Not only the Nazis, but the communists as well. Because really, it's all just forms of socialism. That's what feudalism is. Worldwide socialism is, there's no such thing as private property. State owns everything. Rights don't exist. Property rights don't exist. Everybody's a feudal serf again. It's called neo-feudalism. I don't care which branch you come at it from. You want to come at it from the left, that's called communism. You want to come at it from the right, that's called National Socialism. Communism's international socialism. They're both the same force. It's called feudalism. Let's just call it what it is. It's called feudalism, which is in itself just another euphemism for slavery. They want neo-feudalism, which is the New World Order of slavery. Okay? And it's already here. It's not something that's coming. It's here now. The object is to get out of it. This is the result of following orders. That's what following orders gets to society. Following orders should never be seen as a virtue. Following orders is evil. I don't care whether you're, I don't care if somebody who is considered a holy man gives me an order and I follow it, I've just committed an act of evil, as far as I'm concerned. If I'm acting based on solely what somebody else has told me to do, that's evil. There's no morality in it at all. At all. At all. It's not a virtue. It's evil. Okay? Let me just make that so abundantly clear and state it so unequivocally. There's no such thing as any possible moral following of orders. The two terms are contradictory. All right? I was just following orders is never a valid excuse or justification for immoral criminal behavior, and this lame attempt to abdicate personal responsibility should never be accepted as a valid excuse for such behavior. And why it's done is through justification. And again, that means to create a right, from jus, meaning right or law, and the Latin verb facere, which means to make or to create. And this is what they say. I was just following orders. I was just doing my job. I was shutting down your protest. You don't have a right to speak. The politicians commanded me so. So I just came out and I was just doing my job, hitting you with a sound cannon. You know, just doing my job, just following my orders. It's a justification. You're a criminal. There's nothing moral in that. There's nothing virtuous in that. It's called criminal behavior, criminal activity. And what they do is try to create it into a right, make it into a right by a justification. And nobody should ever accept their justifications. Because you know what their justifications is? You know what they are? It's called a 100% crock of bull that is a complete lie. It's a lie. They're just straight up looking you in the face and saying, I'm not responsible for that. I just did it, but I'm not the one who's responsible for it because I was acting on orders. Well, see, this defense didn't work as the Nuremberg defense, and nobody in America should be accepting it. Nobody in America should be accepting it because they believe in the legitimacy of authority and government through mind control. That's what they believe it. They believe there's legitimacy to it. Most people actually believe that there's legitimacy to this criminal behavior because a class of people calling themselves government have magically been imbued and gifted with such rights, quote unquote. They believe they have rights other people don't. They themselves believe it, but worse is that the people who are actually affected by that criminal behavior, they believe they have the authority to do it. Gandhi said, you assist an evil system most effectively by obeying its orders and decrees. An evil system never deserves such allegiance. Allegiance to it means partaking of the evil. A good person will resist an evil system with his or her whole soul, which means saying no. Moral culpability. What does this mean? The determination of who is ultimately at fault or deserving of blame. Again, this is a legitimate and real concept. There is fault. There is blame. We got to get over this new age nonsense that nobody's at fault, nobody's to blame. You should never say, hey, you shouldn't have done that. That caused a lot of chaos and trauma for other people. You're not to blame. It just happened. No, wrong. The people who did the behavior are to blame. Who carried out the Holocaust in Germany? The people who followed their orders to do it. That's who carried it out. Order followers is the answer. Who carried out the purge of political dissonance in Soviet Russia? Order followers. And they're always in the form of police. Why do you think they call a totalitarian system a police state? Why don't they call it a banker state? How come they don't call it a politician state? What about a lawyer state? How about a judge state? Why not call it any of those things? You want to know why? Because none of those people are ultimately responsible for bringing that condition into manifestation through their behavior. They're the order givers. The order followers carry out their commands and through their behavior make that condition a reality. That's why it's called a police state. Because every police state that has ever existed has always been created by police who follow their orders because they don't want to take responsibility and think for themselves and know the difference between right and wrong for themselves like an adult. Instead, I want to be a child who obeys daddy because I have daddy issues. All right? And that's what it's really about, folks. We're going to get to that. There is such a thing as blame for the commission of actions which have resulted in harm or loss to others. This is what culpable means. It comes from the Latin culpa, meaning fault or blame. It means at fault or deserving of blame. Now, who's more morally culpable? The order giver or the order follower? And please recognize I've underlined and capitalized the term more. I'm not telling you the order givers are not morally culpable. They are. That's not the question. Are any of these people morally culpable is not my question. My question is, look at the full question. Who is more morally culpable? The order giver or the order follower? Always. Always. At all times and places. At all times and places. I put this meme up on Facebook, and I got some hate back for it. Okay? People don't want to hear this. Like I said, I'm not here to be popular, to make friends. I'm here to tell people what the truth actually is, and they have to accept it or reject it on their own. I made this meme and put it up on Facebook, and it had politicians on the left that said, my actions, underlined and capitalized, didn't cause that. And then there was some soldiers or Marines, whatever they are, order followers on the right side, and they're also saying the same statement. My actions didn't cause that. And then at the bottom, I just put this question. I'm sorry. Looks like, I'm sorry. At the top, I put this question. Who is lying and who is telling the truth? So who's lying here? And if people can't see, I hope that they can see this horrific picture. This is the result of, bombings that took place in the Middle East around Iraq. And it's a father carrying his dead child in his arms. Okay? Maybe if bombs were raining down on our children, we might think differently about going in and waging imperialism on other nations. I don't know. Maybe we might think differently about it. Right? But when it happens to somebody else's child, that's okay. That's done in the name of freedom. Okay? Well, who caused this? Did they cause it? No, they didn't cause it. They are not the actual cause of this. Because you know what all they did? They signed some pieces of paper, wearing their expensive suits, okay? And they told these guys, they said, well, you're under our orders now. Go and bomb these people. And you know what these people did? Say, yes, sir, and go and drop the bombs. And fire off the ammunition. Okay? These are the people whose actions create things like this. Not these people. All they're doing is speaking into somebody else's ear. All they've done is speech. Speech, not actions. See, again, really look. My actions didn't cause that. Yes, it is. If these people are saying my actions didn't cause that, they're lying. Very, very, very painful and difficult thing for people to comprehend and accept. I'm not telling you shouldn't feel bad hearing this, but I'm telling you it's true. The painful truth, the order follower always bears more moral culpability than the order giver. For the reason that the order follower is the one who actually performed the action, and in taking such action, actually brought the resultant harm into physical manifestation. Order following is the pathway to every form of evil and chaos in our world. It should never be seen as a virtue by anyone who considers themselves a moral human being. Order followers have ultimately been personally responsible and morally culpable for every form of slavery and every single totalitarian regime that has ever existed upon the face of the earth. That's the painful truth that people don't want to accept because they want to believe the absolute nonsense that order following is a virtue of any kind. And it needs to be obliterated from the face of the earth because it's not the way to any kind of virtues or order. It's the pathway to evil and annihilation. That's what it is. Responsibility versus abdication. So why don't these people want to think for themselves?
It's too easy.
It's too easy to just follow the orders of somebody else. They believe somehow magically this absolves them of personal responsibility to choose right from wrong. An individual's personal responsibility to choose right action over wrong action for themselves always belongs to that individual. And that responsibility can never be given to another person or passed along. One can only claim and imagine that they can abdicate their personal responsibility for such choice to someone else. It can never actually be done in reality. You're only making a claim. I'm not responsible for that behavior because this person told me to do it. That's just a claim. And moreover, what it really is it's just a damn lie. Okay? More simply put, an individual is always personally responsible for their own actions, period, and the end. If you did it, you're responsible for it. There are no cop-outs. Stop trying to make excuses or justifications for criminal behavior. Own up to personal responsibility. If you did wrong action, you did it. You caused it. I like how David Icke words this. He says, accept responsibility for yourself and your actions, thoughts, and words. You alone make these choices, so you alone are answerable to the consequences of your behavior. The feeble excuse that your boss required it, that the establishment expected it, holds no truth or justification. What is the point of having principles if you allow others to dictate your behavior? Really, those who allow others to dictate their behavior don't have principles. And there's a reason they don't have principles, because they hate themselves. They're in psychological self-loathing, and there's a reason they're in that state, which my future work is going to cover in depth, in extensive depth and detail. At the end of the day, you will judge your performance and the contribution you've made to creation. It will not be based on what another expected of you or what you did because you felt trapped. Like, oh, there's no other way. I can't envision my way out of this. I can't envision doing something else. I might have to get another job. I might have to read and learn. I can't envision becoming a different person than the identity I've already forged for myself. How could I possibly imagine that? I have all my eggs in this basket. My whole ego identity is all wrapped up in my job and what I do. That defines who I am. I can't go against that. It's all nonsense. It's all what people are doing just because they feel trapped and they can't imagine that there's another way. Most people erroneously believe this is the second part of the abdication of responsibility on the part of the people. Most people erroneously believe that they can hand over their natural law right to defend themselves to another individual, group, or entity. In making such a false claim that somebody else is my protector, somebody else, it's their responsibility to protect me, and defend me, they have attempted to abdicate a personal responsibility which actually always belongs to them and can never be given away. That's the self-defense principle. You own it. It's yours. You can't give it away to somebody else. Shock and amazement. Okay? That is your responsibility already. And guess what? You know what? They're all too happy. These controllers are now even all too happy to say, it's not our responsibility to protect you. Because what their actual goal is they're just revenue men for the new king. That's all they are. And to slap people back into line if they try to exercise rights that the new king called government has decreed that they may not exercise. That's what their real role is. They don't serve and protect the people. They serve and protect the ruling class. And they don't want to admit that to themselves. You know why? Because they're liars, most of all to themselves. It's a bunch of childish liars. Franklin said those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither and will lose both. And this addresses the fear of chaos and the desire to abdicate your personal responsibility to defend yourself to other people just because you're afraid and you don't want to take the responsibility of doing it yourself. You want to stay in that mindset? I'll give up my freedom to be safe? Well, enjoy your safe slavery. I, for one, will take my dangerous and chaotic freedom. Okay? I'll take the absolute cannibal lurking around every corner. And I'll take my chances. Thank you very much. Give me my freedom and my assault rifle, and I'll take my chances. Thank you. Okay? So the idea that you just want to be kept safe and you'll give up your freedom to do so, it's just a child. That's how a child thinks. And that's what this is really about. Not wanting to grow up and become adults. And again, there's a reason for this. This is the underlying psychological reason, but there's an even deeper one. But I'm going to touch on this one first. Self-respect versus self-loathing. People who don't want to take personal responsibility and become an adult are in this psychological condition. It's called self-loathing. What it means is you hate yourself. Nobody who wants to perpetuate slavery can possibly like themselves. They cannot love themselves. It's impossible. You are already in a state of self-hatred if you believe in government, if you believe in its legitimacy. Okay? Because you believe in slavery, and therefore you're in that slavery system and you want it to continue. How could you possibly love yourself? It's not possible. Self-loathing is the underlying psychological condition that causes people to attempt to abdicate their own personal responsibility to exercise conscience and fall into patterns of order following and justification. Just as it is not possible for an order follower to truly be exercising conscience, it is not possible for an order follower to truly love themselves. These two states cannot exist simultaneously. You cannot be an order follower and love yourself. It is impossible. They are contradictory psychological conditions. Okay? Here's what a self-loathing person really is. They're trapped in a trauma abuse victim cycle. A trauma happens, there's an abuser, there's a victim, and then it repeats itself. Because often the one who's abused becomes the traumatizer, and then the cycle repeats again. Talked about this pretty extensively on my podcast series. All right? That's what self-loathing, that's what this mind state, okay? This is a golem creature, okay? It's a 100% programmed and lifeless thing that is imbued with the ability to actually move like a robot. You can liken it to a flesh robot, okay? And it's a concept in ancient dark occultism, all right? And the golem is driven by the force of self-loathing. And that's what the order followers are. They're golems. Okay? I'm not saying this to insult people. I don't really care how people take it. I'm telling them what they really are and what the dark occultists think of them. They call them their dogs and their pets. That's their name for the police and the military. I did a whole series on that. Okay? And I'm not telling you that from book knowledge. I'm telling you that from their lips to my ears. That's what they call them. The golem is in this mindset. Since I have suffered, I will cause suffering to others. Since I can't deal with my nested psychological traumas and childhood issues and inadequacy issues, okay, I'm going to take out all of that nested, subconscious, psychological frustration on other people that I have no right to take it out upon. That's the golem mindset. Self-loathing is created when an earlier trauma has been suppressed and buried deeply into the subconscious. That's the role of the subconscious, to protect the conscious mind from traumatic experiences so that the conscious mind doesn't keep reliving it and therefore re-experiencing it in the physiology. However, if we never bring up that shadow material to the conscious level, it builds and builds and builds until it ultimately destroys us, psychically and spiritually. All right? Instead of confronting, dealing with, and healing that trauma, people don't want to do that work. It's too hard to dredge up that shadow material. It's hard work. Believe me, to come out of the mind state I was in, I had to do that shadow work for years. Years of more suffering and pain, saying, what do I have to look in the mirror and confront about myself? And then work to change and admit thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong. I don't know how many thousands of times I had to look in the mirror and say that to myself. Sometimes to a point where I was so depressed I couldn't get out of bed for days. I would just sit and lay in bed and play doom metal all day. Literally. endlessly, repetitively. And just sitting there in that condition of total self-loathing and total depression because of what I know I took part in. And that I know was still my mental makeup, was still my psychological makeup that was going to take years to get out of. And I'm trying to explain this to prevent people from having to go through all that suffering. This knowledge can be gleaned without having to go down that path. It can be done. I'm not telling you that's easy work, but it is possible. Such trauma could take the form of feelings of inadequacy, whether they are real or imagined. And you know what that mind state ultimately is? It's a self-prison. That's somebody putting themselves in a cage. These people who want to take out their psychological frustrations on other people, they're prisoners. They are in the cage and they love being in the cage. They don't have any desire for freedom. The only kind of person that would have no desire for real freedom is a person who's in the psychological state of self-loathing and hates themselves and does not love themselves. Now, what heals self-loathing? Self-respect. And we have to know what the word respect means. And this is about looking at yourself. Introspection. Respect comes from the Latin re, meaning again, and the Latin verb spectare, which means to look at. You put them together, to look at again, to take another look at. Well, what are you taking another look at? You're taking another look at yourself. That's what respect starts as. You can't give something to somebody that you don't have. If I don't have $10 in my pocket, I can't give it to you. If I don't have a coin in my pocket, I can't give it to somebody else. You got to have it first to give it. So nobody can give respect to anybody else unless they first developed it inwardly. Self-respect has to come first. And that's why these people don't respect anybody, order followers, most of all themselves. Until they do that work of self-introspection, they're not going to develop that self-respect. And I'm not telling you that's easy work. It's hard work that can take a lot of time. And it's dredging up shadow material that most people want to run away from. They don't want to confront that about themselves. Only self-respect can heal self-loathing and therefore help to put an order follower on the path to conscience. We need to take another look at ourselves. The lost word. All right, this is the end of